It's an honor
Good
and a privilege, humble to be able to introduce your shiur on Pirkei Avot, and thank you to the family that you approached me to surprise you and to be able to say some opening words. First of all, you should now start from the end. I'm talking now from our training seminar for our outgoing shlichim for Torah Mitzion. I'm in the midst of the training. And when I say that for 25 years almost, we've been sending out shlichim to communities around the world to set up a makom Torah, a Beit Midrash. And you know what, Rabbi? It all stems back to Glen Hazel, to you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Harav Avraham Tanzer, Av Hamon Goim, that you, Kvod Harav, instilled and imbued us the love of Torah, the love of Eretz Israel, the love of Am Israel, and that you once told me when we met, Ata mashpia al dorot, you are having an influence on generations. And therefore, when this Pirkei Avot, you, Kvod Harav, and Marsha together and your whole family have made an impact on generations. And we took the strength from you. And therefore, this opportunity is to say a few words that your family for us growing up, when Yiddishkeit wasn't so strong, wasn't the ideal family. It was, you were role models for us. Your children were our friends and our mentors. We learned from them how to keep mitzvot, how to keep minhagim. Sometimes I ask myself, I should call back and ask, how are we keeping the different halachot? Because we didn't come from a religious family. We learned it from your family. And therefore, your children, who every time I see or hear about is like our big one family, Rav Baruch and Rav Dov and Nechama and Chaya and Goldie and Siona, the whole family all over the world. It was like growing up one big family because you were role models to us. And that you came to South Africa, you taught us the concept of shlichut, of coming out and giving of yourselves to others. And therefore, I see that as we carry on all these years as what we can do that you did for us. And you know, your family and yourselves particular were a pillar of support for us individually, a source of guidance that helped us navigate many challenges through life. And in all the years, I made sure when I visited Johannesburg to come see you and to get those words of chizuk and guidance like a lighthouse, that we are on a steady path. Every time I get up to give a speech, I think of how the rabbi would introduce it with a joke or with content, and so Rabotai, and leave it off with the clear message. And every time you are in my mind, from you I took those kochot. So when you talk about Pirkei Avot, you are the father for many, not only for your wonderful family, but from all the children that grew up in Glen Hazel that you and Marsha fathered. So I wanted to say Toda Rabah, thank you. And that I know your birthday is every Sukkot, second day, and I feel like I celebrate it. I can't really because you keep 2 days and I keep 1 day. Been in Israel now, Baruch Hashem, over 35 years, but a way to call you on a Chag this day, Toda Rabah, and that you should continue together, Le'orech Shanim, Bebriut, and there's nachas from all your family around the world. And we've got Torah Mitzion in Montreal, so sometimes I've heard of the family in Montreal that goes, and from wherever I bumped into Tiona once in Washington, and when coming here or there, but you should know all the children and great children, this is one big Baruch Hashem, Kiddush Hashem. So Toda Rabah, and like Dil Torah Veladira, and so indebted to all of you, and Bezat Hashem Rak B'Smachot.
Thank you, Reb Zev. Thank you, Reb Zev, for beautiful moving words, which are totally undeserved, but appreciated nevertheless. And all I want to say is the nachas that we have when we see what you're doing. The nachas that you're being becomers of Torah all over the world. Torah Mitzion has been a resounding success and brought Torah to hundreds and thousands of people. And that's you. And that is you and your handful of friends and Yeshiva you. Thank you so much for being here this morning or this afternoon. And with Hashem should give us courage to meet for many years to come. Okay. Children, grandchildren, friends of all like family. Let's go back to our shiur on Pirkei. I made the point a few times already, and we'll go back to that point for a second. All right, Shimon HaTzadik taught us three things. Shimon HaTzadik, what did he teach us? The world stands on three things, and what are the three things? Ala Torah, Ala Avodah, Al Gemilas Chasodim. All right. Now, I've mentioned many times over the last month or so that the name of Samson Farosh and the Abarbanel was before, of course, that in the following three Mishnayot, which follow that, are dealing with these three subjects. In other words, the extension of the words of Shimon HaTzadik are the words of Antignos Yisocho, the words of Yossi ben Yehuda Israel and Yossi ben Yochanan Ish Yerushalayim. The next three Mishnayot are extending and telling us all about the three values. Antignos Yisocho, as we remember, what did he tell us? That al tiyu kavadim, don't be like servants who serve the master in order to receive reward, al master kal pras, but be like servants who serve the master non-unconditional. All right, so that's avodah. He is elaborating on avodah. What is avodah? That's not a simple thing, because what does it mean exactly? How do you apply it? And obviously, millions of people, each one have their own application. But that's what he says. Here we have avodah. We want to serve Hashem because we want to do Ritzon Hashem. We want to make Kiddush Hashem. That's our goal. And if there's reward to come, it would be very nice. And I'm sure there is. But that's not the intention when we do a mitzvah. Then came along after that. Came along Yossi ben Yezer. And what did he say? He said, he said that your house should be a gathering place for Chachamim, and so on and so forth. He gave us some details. And then, of course, what is he talking about? Ala Torah. This is Torah. So we have Ala Avodah, Ala Torah, and the last member is Yossi ben Yezer, is Yossi ben Yochanan Ish Yerushalayim. He talks about Gemilas Chasodim. What is that? He basically pasuach levacha. Your house should be, to use Herschel's words, revacha comes in the English word relief. A house should be a house of relief. And Brother Wine in his what he called Pirkei says that the pasuach levacha is the essence of a home. The essence of a home is that people should feel comfortable, feel comforted. If they are depressed, in other words, find succor, to use his words, Succor, succor, that's the epitome of what a home is all about. So I was thinking to myself, of all these three things now, they're all different. And of course, the Mishnah is speaking to everyone, to you, to me, to everybody else as well. And each one hears it in his own way. So which one of these is the more awkward one? Which would you say is the harder to fulfill, which is the easier to fulfill? All right. So I was thinking out loud to myself, I was thinking quietly actually to myself, and I thought to myself, look, what's the name? Antignos Yisocho, he talks about avodah. Okay. Now avodah is very personal. Every Jew has his own relationship with Hashem, and every Jew has his own picture of Hashem in his mind, in his heart, in his neshama. and we're trying to activate. We're trying to become close to Hashem. All these three things, all of them are supposed to bring us closer to Hashem, Kiruv Hashem, close to God. But what is it? How do we do it? How do we do it? It depends on us. No two people can do it the same way because no two people are the same. So here we're talking to somebody who's a Yireh Shamayim, and what is he saying? What are we saying? That don't serve Hashem al manas l'kabel sachar. Then comes along Yosef ben Yeva Yisrael. What does he say? Well, he talks about Torah. What does he say? Torah. I'll spell it out because he mentions three things. Your house should be a gathering place for Chachamim. In other words, as I said the other day, Chachamim should feel at home in your house. They should want to be there. If they're not comfortable, they're not going to come. They won't be there. Your house can become a very loud Chachamim if you talk junk. So it has to be a place where Chachamim feel at home. And then it says, very strange expression here. Cling to them like you cling to the dust on their legs. Cling to the dust on their legs, which means attach yourself to them. And then he says, and be thirsty. Never have enough. Right. So if we would say, what is this all about? Again, he's talking to so many different people. Different people at different levels. Now, who are your ideas of who should be the guests in your house? Depends on where you come from. Depends on how you've been living. Depends how you've been thinking. You can't expect the Gadol to come in if no Shem Shabbos was over there before. And so on and so forth. So each one represents its own challenge. And then comes along Yosef ben Yochanan Yerushalayim, and he what does he say? It's about Chesed. It's about Chesed. And to spell it out in his words, your house should be wide open, a place of sukkah. And poor people should feel at home. A place of Chesed. B'nei Aniyim should be B'nei B'secha. B'nei Aniyim should be like family. Now, all these categories depend on who you are and where you come from. And no two can be the same. So I saw a comment which made a lot of sense. A comment that I saw in the name of Reb Nissen Alpert. Reb Nissen Alpert was the man who died, a very young man, around 30, 40 years ago. He was the closest Talmud of Reb Moshe Feinstein. Nissen Alpert he wrote a number of Sorim, very well received in the Torah world. So Nissen Alpert said as follows: this is the most awkward. The most awkward is because when you bring into your house people of real standing, and you're going to end up having to compare your way of life to their way of life, you're going to feel like you're dust. You're going to feel not on the same wavelength. It's another world, and it's going to make you squirm. The other two, you don't have to squirm. You could say you believe. You believe in an open home, that's fine. But here you're inviting a point of comparison, and a point of comparison isn't simple. So it is liable to make you squirm. It probably will make you squirm if you get the right people to come to your house. So this one, Reb Nissen Alpert said, this is the most difficult of the three he believes. Because at the end of the day, this is what we're being called upon to do, is to invite people to your house, and they will remind you of the halachos we don't keep. They'll remind you of the chumash we don't subscribe to. They remind you to the Torah we don't learn. So you're going to feel awkward. You're not going to feel happy at all. But that's part of it. That's part of creating the ambience of the three mishnayot that we have over here. All right. Now, I went into this once before, but I'm sure I'll go into it again, so we won't go step in it now. Right? Gedolei Yisrael, in every generation we have Gedolim. Not many, unfortunately, but we have Gedolei Yisrael. And the Gedolei Yisrael are idolized by the whole house of Klal Yisrael. Idolized. They are not men who occupy positions of prominence. They're not chief rabbis necessarily, etc., but they're people that the Jewish world follows. The Jewish world embraces them. Right? Now, these people, by and large, if we look at the letter we had in the last 20, 30, 40 years, first of all, they live long. They live long. Some of them live well over 100 years old. They live in their 90s. They're not recognized till they're in the 70s or 80s. So Godel becomes a Godel. He's a very old man. They're geniuses, of course. They know the whole Torah. Otherwise, he couldn't be a Godel. And so it's a handful of people. A handful of people. Now, why do these people live so long? Why do they have this gift? Of course, Hashem is rewarding them for a good life, but it's more than that. Because they live in a world without pressure. They live in a world where opposite their eyes, opposite their face, they see the challenge of life. What does Hashem want? And in knowing that they're spending 24 hours a day in dealing with that challenge, no hang-ups, no nervous, no competition, no jealousy. There's no room for any of these things. They live in another dimension. And because they're living in another dimension, they have different values. And their interpretation of these three values we talked about here will totally vary. Because these are Gedolei Yisrael, and we very rarely have the privilege of meeting Gedolei Yisrael. But to Gedolei Yisrael is all natural. So I want to share with you something I saw on the Rosh Yeshiva Harav Avraham was born in Lithuania, but he came to America as a child. He was the Rosh Yeshiva Harav until he died in the year 2001, 2002, so it's quite a while back. And I remember him well from Harav. Listen to this. So he says, this concept, he basically Pasuch Levocha, he says, this is the concept of Yatram Avraham. We talked about it the other day. The concept of Achnos Eloch was Avraham Avinu. Avraham Avinu had two entrances to his tent. Eve had four, etc., etc. Okay, in South Africa we have one because of security, of course. Anyhow, what that meant that from whatever direction a person came, he was welcome. A person felt welcome when he saw your house. He saw the open door. He saw the welcome mat. And he said, and he said, and said Rapam, the challenge that a person has in life is not only to be a Bal Chesed, but he uses these words, Oyev Chesed. Oyev Chesed, in the last Bracha Shmon Esrei, what do we say to Hashem? We plead with Hashem to give us Avas Chesed, not Chesed, a love to do Chesed, an appreciation of Chesed. That's to be his bracha. When a person feels blessed that he can do. Pam said once described how children came, the Gemara in Shabbos says children came to the Resmedish and they were giving meaningful expositions into the letters of the alphabets. So the children said they were explaining the shape of a gimel and the shape of a dalet. The shape of a gimel has a leg which is extending toward the dalet. So what uses lotion? Goimel dalim. Goimel dalim. The letter gimel represents the one who wants to give to the poor. Give the dalim. Dalim represents dalim, and gimel represents goimel. In other words, it's the nature of a person to want to extend himself to the poor, and that's called an Oyev Chesed. And the Oyev Chesed is not simple. The Chaim used to say, and I'm still quoting him, that the Pasuk in Mishlei says is Roidev Tzedokim B'Chesed Yimtzah Chaim Tzedokim B'Chesed. We call it a person who looks Pasuk in Mishlei, a person who pursues Tzedokim and Chesed will find it. And he's learning Pshat of Chaim. It means to say he'll be rewarded. He will find it because If these are the things that matter, and these are the things you want to happen, Hashem will make it come your way. Right? And then he says, this was Avraham Avinu. Avraham Avinu was the Oyev Chesed who ran out to look after the Arabs that were crossing the desert in the middle of a hot day right after he had a bris milah, because that was what it was all about, an open home, etc., etc. And so you had the Malachim, Michal, Gabriel, and you received Hashem bracha to have children right there in that tent. That was called Oyev Chesed. Now, Rabbi Palmer is actually following the line that I was trying to say. To a Godel Yisrael, these things are natural. He's not concentrating. He's not concentrating. This is natural. Natural means every fiber of your being, 24 hours a day. That's what you're all about. Okay? And then he goes on, he tells us this. He said the Dubna Magid, famous Dubna Magid, well known for his Mishom, of course, was also known as an Oyev Chesed. He was a man who went out of his way to do Chesed. The Magid did Chesed. When he rented an apartment, he always made a trial with the landlord. He could have indigent people stay there as long as they wanted to, even though they rub out the furniture and they make a mess, and the kids make a mess. There was a condition he made. He built it into the relationship that he could always have all the guests that he wanted. And then he tells us that you have to be doing the maggot for this. These are not things about value setting. Listen to this. One day the Maggid saw an elderly blind man walking with a young boy. Elderly man walking with a young boy. He obviously knew neither of them. Anyhow, he invited them to his home, and they stayed with them for a while. They didn't come for a meal. They didn't come for the afternoon. They stayed there for a while. A while probably means weeks, months, maybe even years. And eventually the old man died. And the old man died, and the boy had nowhere to go. The boy had nowhere to go, so the Dubna Maggid adopted him. He adopted him, and he arranged for Malama to teach him Torah, and he devoted time and energy and expense to help the helpless Yosef. Eventually, this little boy grew up to become a world-renowned Torah leader, Shlomo Kluger, who was the famous Rov of Brod in Galicia, well-known, really a well-known God, and that was his chus. That's what the Dubna Maggid did as an act of chesed to people that didn't know. Now, these are not things that we can even relate to, but this is what it was all about. This is how they believed. The Godel Ador, the Rov of Brod, became a Godel because the Dubna Maggid saw him as a child, and he said, he's a place. He needs to be looked after. And so, says Rapam, he basically everyone has their own idea. Everyone will have their own idea what that means. And this was the Dubna Maggid's idea. His idea was to take a Yosef, look after him for 10, 20 years, however long it took to feed him, to grow him, to look after him, and to see if the right teachers and to pay for those teachers. And the result was that we had one of the leading luminaries of Klal Yisrael. Okay, the base let me carry on. I came because a very interesting idea on these Mishnayot, which I share with you for a moment here, from the well-known Irving Bunim. I'd love to quote Irving Bunim. Irving Bunim was one of the Orthodox leaders of the Jewish world in the 1940s, 50s, 60s. He became a very close confidant of Rabban Kotler. He helped Rabban build Chinuch Atzmai and build Lakewood, etc., etc., and he helped save Jews. He did a lot of work for Atzola, and he was a balabos. He was a rabbi. He was a balabos in the Young Israel of Manhattan, what was called the Young Israel, the east side of New York. And they used to give a Pirkei of a shiur for 25 years. For 25 years, everybody gave a shiur. And in the shiur on our Mishnah, he came across it a little earlier today. Listen to what he says. So we're quoting here today, Yosef ben Yochanan ish Yerushalayim. Yosef ben Yochanan of Yerushalayim. And what did he say? Your house should be open for relief, and poor people should feel at home. All right, listen to this. I remember when I was in Cleveland in the late 1950s, maybe early 60s. I was teaching at the Hebrew Academy of Cleveland, and we had a secular principal, William Rosenblum, fine Orthodox Jew, okay, American born, etc. And he was making Aliyah. That was hardly the thing to do. Hardly the thing to do. An American guy who had a job and so on, going on Aliyah. Okay. And then William Rosenblum told me one day that he's not moving to Yerushalayim. Well, I couldn't understand that. We were American kids. So if somebody was going to Yisrael, surely Yerushalayim would be the place to go. So he said, no, he says, I'm going to Rehovot. So he said, what's Rehovot? He said, look, he says, if we go to Yerushalayim, we'll never manage to stay there. People will come to visit us. People will want to stay with us. People will want a meal. We won't have that kind of finance. So we won't be able to live there. We'll end up having to leave ourselves. So we're going to go to Rehovot, and we'll make a plan to meet someone if we want to meet them. Okay, interesting. So listen to this. Irving Buner makes this point. The town of the Mishnah over here, Yosef ben Yochanan, where did he come from? Yerushalayim. He came from Yerushalayim. Yosef ben Yochanan came from Yerushalayim, and what did he say? He said, have an open home. He basically pasuch levacha, b'yu aniyim b'nei beisecha, and poor people should feel at home in your house. Now imagine, said Irving Buner, imagine that. Yerushalayim was a place where Jews came from the whole world 3 times a year, or the regular, to come to the Beit HaMikdash. Yerushalayim, thousands of Jews needed a place to stay. People probably were renting out rooms all over the show. And nevertheless, there seemed to be enough place for everybody. Nevertheless, there was enough room for all the pilgrims. So there was something there. There was a welcome mat in front of every house that said welcome. And people came. The whole Jewish world came to Yerushalayim, and they all found a place to stay. Okay. So in other words, obviously in Yerushalayim of Yosef ben Yochanan, this idea was practiced. Your house should be open, wide open space. People should feel welcome. They should know that they are welcome. Now he points out one more point over here, which was very interesting. You know, there are 2 types of people who came to Yerushalayim. 2 types of people came to Yerushalayim. One of them was the guy who came on a little regular. He came 3 times a year from Israel, from elsewhere. Shiur, Sukkot, Pesach, Yontif. And there was another guy who came to Yerushalayim. There was a guy who killed somebody b'shogeg. Somebody who killed somebody b'shogeg and needed to go to the Ir Miklat, needed to find his way to the city of refuge. He also came, right? And interestingly, Gemara tells us that when he came to the Ir Miklat, there had signs all over. There were signs all over to guide the person to find a place of Miklat, because if you didn't find your place, the Goel Adam, the avenger of blood of the person you killed, would come and kill you. He could come and kill you. There'd be no recourse to law either. So it was a difficult situation to be in. So look at this. When it came to the Ir Miklat, there were signs all over with arrows pointing out Ir Miklat this way, this direction, here, there, so you can get there as fast as possible and avoid getting hurt and getting killed. But when it came to Aliyah L'Regel, there was no such thing. When it came for the thousands of Jews that came every year, there was no such thing. And so it says Irving Buner, and he says it so beautifully, because when the guy was running for his life, he had killed someone, right? It wasn't that important that he should stop on the way and go into people's homes and ask, how do you get to the Ir Miklat? First of all, you're advertising what you did. Nobody wanted to do that anyhow. But besides that, what kind of a company is this? Why would you want to introduce your family to a murderer? Okay, unintentional murder. But what's the chap? What's the big deal? But on the other hand, when it came to the people who came on Aliyah the Regel, who came to fulfill the mitzvah of spending Yontif in Yerushalayim, it was beautiful. Let him stop at every house, ask how you get there. Let him meet the family. Let him become part of the brotherhood of Yerushalayim. So that's how it was. So Yosef ben Yochanan came to Yerushalayim, and etc., and therefore the house was open wide. All right. Let me carry on the base side. Okay. There's a nice quip. It's actually a joke, actually. All right. The Mishnah said you should treat poor guests with no less consideration than you treat your own family. You should treat them with consideration. Let the poor people feel at home in your house. Now, it doesn't mean you should advertise that all poor people are welcome. There's many poor people that want people to know they're poor. So you're going to meanwhile exclude people from coming. So it doesn't mean you have to advertise that. Nevertheless, it should be known that yours is a home where people can come, be comfortable, feel wanted, feel embraced, leave feeling good about themselves, and leave your home with confidence. So there were two famous Hasidic Rabbeim in Europe. One is the Melech of the Zensk, a big tzaddik. To this day, thousands of Jews on the 21st of Adar come to this town in Poland, to the cemetery, but thousands, not hundreds, thousands. I was there with the Rosh Yeshiva some years ago, and it's unbelievable to see what you see there. It's your side, and it's the place to be, and to pray, to daven, and El Al has planes flying every hour. Every hour, the planes are flying in and out of Poland. Anyhow, so the Melech of the Zens had a brother, Rav Zusha of Anipoli. When they were young, they traveled from place to place unknown. In other words, what they call it in Europe, traveling golus. They practiced golus. They tore themselves away from home. They suffered deprivation. They went around hoping in the schus of what they were doing, they'd be forgiven for whatever. All right. So they came. They were poor. They were very poor. They acted poor. They looked poor. They probably were poor, and so on. And they came to a town called Ludmir. The council of Ludmir, a leading citizen of the town of Ludmir, thought maybe he should have them as guests. But when he came to see them and he saw what they looked like, he declared it's beneath his dignity to invite such beggars into his home. Okay, so they found a Rebbe, a tutor. The Rebbe taught the young Talmidim, who was very happy to have him as his guest, and that's what they used to say. When they got older, they became very well known. They were famous Hasidic leaders, but really famous Hasidic leaders. By now they had a lot of Hasidim, and the Hasidim bought them horses and wagons, and they were royal. All of a sudden they were royal. So they came back to the same town, and the same Balabos in Ludmir, he heard there were tzaddikim in town. So he ran to the tzaddikim, and he met the two gentlemen, and he said, "Gentlemen," he said, "I would be so honored if you would come to my house. I'd love you to be my guest while you're here in our town of Ludmir." And the two people, Melech and Zisha, turned around. They said, "So look, the truth of the matter is we were here before. We were here before, and you weren't that keen on having us stay with you then. But right now we see you're very keen. So all we can imagine, and the only difference between then and now is that now we have a wagon and horses. So tell you what, if you like to look after our horses and wagon, you can do that. But I'm going back to the Malabar, okay? So in other words, give people dignity deserved, dignity, etc., okay? And the same story is told about another student of the Maggid HaMedrash, Rabbi Yitzchak Badishim. that every sukkah he would invite beggars into his sukkah. He used to invite beggars to his sukkah. So Hasidim said, not nice to invite so many beggars. A little less with the beggars. So he said, listen, he said, I want you to tell you something. He says, when I'm going to come up to heaven, I'm going to try to enter the branch of Sukkah of Yosef. Hashem is a Sukkah of Leviathan. I'm going to try to enter that Sukkah. And they're going to tell me at the door, only tzaddikim come here. This is only reserved for tzaddikim. So I will say, when I was alive, when we were, etc., we always invited all the poor people. So we will get into the Sukkah because of them. Okay. So this is a pshat of what these mishnayos are talking about. So the Rabbi say, right now, as I pointed out last time, the Mishnah ends. The second Mishnah ends with another section of the Mishnah that says, it is really another part of the Mishnah which is not attached. As a matter of fact, in Avos Reb Nosson, which is the Pirkei Avos of the Tanzer Reb Nosson, which is not the Pirkei Avos of Yehuda Anosi, which is what we have over here. So in that Mishnah, it doesn't even appear, but we have it here. So it's part of our Mishnah. We're going to deal with it. But I'm going to leave that for the end, for the next week or so. We'll spend the shiur on that Mishnah itself, because that Mishnah talks about male-female relationships of all kinds, of all levels, at all ages, and it's putting life into a nutshell. It's putting life into a nutshell of what that important part of life is all about. So meanwhile, we're here. So we dealt with 3 different ways to fulfill 3 mitzvahs. And of course, it depends on exactly who a person is, what a person is, what your approach to life is, what you want to be, where you want your children to head. And Miz Hashem, through all Bizarcha, to fulfill the words of these great Tanoim and have nachas from our children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, please God. Thank you so much. Thank you, Reb Zev. Thank you, David. Thanks for hosting. Thank you all. Thank you for being here. Have a pleasant
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Harav, I just wanted to say one more word, and I didn't say at the beginning. The terminology I looked for is, we spoke about Pirkei Avot, so I wanted to say spiritual father. That's the word I wanted to use in relationship to you, for you, and that you have been for us. So I wanted you to say thank you for
I'm
that.
touched and I'm flattered. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Dad.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye.
Dad.
Bye.
Thanks,
That was
everybody.
beautiful, Dad. Thank you.
Take care. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
Mom.
you.
Bye-bye. Have a good week,
Bye.
everybody.
You
Bye.
too. Bye.
Bye.
Shabbat shalom.
Bye.
Bye.